10,000 NVIDIA H200 processors each, reportedly, still stranded. This story follows one imported rack after the border. Later, one operating signal will tell us whether delivery became a real AI lead. For NVIDIA investors and Tencent shareholders, that gap matters more than the box count. Permission can create sales. Only deployment creates usable compute. So what turns a shipment into productive capacity? The first lead goes to the shipment. The surprise is what it fails to settle. Tom's Hardware, citing Financial Times reporting, said ByteDance and Tencent each received about 10,000 H200 processors in recent weeks. On the delivery scoreboard, imported hardware moved ahead. The stranded rack finally has a shipping label, and that is all this evidence establishes. The headline answers a border question, not an operating question. A processor can reach a buyer while its rack still waits for a suitable site, dependable power, cluster networking, software integration, and an approved workload. So this rivalry is larger than NVIDIA versus an export rule. Imported performance races a chain of deployment constraints. H200 leads when silicon is counted. The constraints lead whenever the scoreboard switches to useful work. That makes the shipment a commercial win and an incomplete strategic win. The next scorecard separates what a license can permit from what no license can provide, an operating cluster. Permission opens one gate. The rack still faces the gates that make it useful. The U.S. Commerce Department says H200 license applications will receive individual review. That is a policy reversal from a closed gate to a conditional one. It does not turn every order into an automatic shipment. The published rule also defines technical ceilings. Qualifying chips sit below 21,000 in total processing performance and below 6,500 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth. Those limits define eligibility. They do not measure productive use. NVIDIA lists the H200 with 141 gigabytes of HBM3E memory moving data at 4.8 terabytes per second. Those are formidable chip-level specifications. They say nothing about whether a particular building can feed, cool, connect, and schedule the rack. Permission chooses which silicon may travel. Operators still choose the building, electricity, cooling, network, software, and workload. Each handoff is a chance for a scarce accelerator to become expensive inventory instead of productive capacity. Hong Kong looks like a route. Power turns that route into a physical test. Reuters relayed Financial Times reporting that Chinese regulators told companies they could route the processors to Hong Kong. Politically, that creates a destination. Physically, it concentrates the deployment question in a market with finite buildings and electrical capacity. Tom's Hardware counted 47 Hong Kong data centers totaling about 581 megawatts. Read that as a warning. The facility draws more power than the computing equipment alone. For one company's 100,000 processor allowance, the same report estimated about 12,500 servers. It put the IT load at 125 megawatts. A chip authorization can therefore arrive in a unit that a city must physically absorb. Hong Kong changes the bottleneck shape. The contest becomes suitable. Floor space, grid access, cooling, and interconnects inside one geography. A legal route is not automatically a highly utilized cluster. Location can ration compute after policy releases it. The next lead change happens inside the software team. An imported rack never competes alone. It brings a programming environment, operating habits, and a procurement choice. A domestic accelerator asks the same engineering team to maintain a second path. The scarce resource becomes attention as well as electricity. Huawei is the challenger on the second lane, yet delivery headlines do not score its real workload output. Declaring either stack the winner now would be theater. The business question is where engineers spend their next month and which tools keep the work running. Choose one stack and integration effort concentrates. Require two and engineers duplicate work while the domestic path gains live workloads to learn from. That is how one shipment can support NVIDIA's sales while accelerating China's effort to reduce dependence on NVIDIA. Picture the stranded rack beside two oversized adapters. Neither is decorative. One fits today's imported hardware. The other preserves tomorrow's procurement auction. The operator pays the integration cost before either path reaches full speed. Very efficient, if your goal is buying headaches in bulk. Forget delivery counts. The final lead appears in one operating behavior. The promised signal is sustained utilization, how often deployed accelerators perform useful work instead of waiting on power, data, networking, or software. Delivery counts inventory. Utilization counts capacity. That is the number that separates a shipment from a lead. For NVIDIA, watch whether licensed H200 deliveries become repeat orders and larger working clusters. For Tencent, watch whether added compute shortens training and serving queues rather than merely expanding inventory. Those operating signals matter more than a launch day headline. So, who gained ground? NVIDIA won the delivery lap. Operators and policymakers now control the deployment lap. Huawei gains only if the second stack absorbs real workloads. H200 gains only if imported racks stay busy. The scarce asset is no longer permission alone. It is usable cluster time. That is why the next shipment headline will tell us less than the next utilization signal. To see the other side of this race, watch China's AI chip push has a new bottleneck output. It starts where this stranded rack leaves off.